Let's spend a few moments now talking with Dustin Van Liew, who is the CEO of the Public Lands Council. And Dustin, you've been busy with a lot of issues. Let's get right to probably the first on most people's minds is waters of the U.S. EPA has come out with their ruling. Not exactly what we had hoped for.
That's correct. We've, over the last couple years, continued to push back against the Environmental Protection Agency in finalizing the final WOTUS, or Waters of the United States, rule. Unfortunately, they did not listen to the cattle industry and the livestock folks that sent extensive comments on why we thought that they were outside their legal authority under the Clean Water Act with this rule. So now that the rule has been finalized, we just recently filed a lawsuit in the district court in Texas. PLC and National Cattlemen's Beef Association and 12 other industry groups to push back against the EPA and hopefully get the courts to agree with us that they've gone beyond their legal authority and tossed this rule and send it back to the dustbin where it belongs.
Where do you think this will come? I've asked this before. Is this a situation where, because we will have somebody new in the White House after next year, can this be a waiting game, or this will still be implemented regardless? I mean, can we tie this thing up in the courts long enough?
Well, we will attempt to, and we'll ask for an injunction likely to put a stop to the rule during the court process to hopefully stop those impacts for cattle producers across the country. But those are things that are being discussed right now in the court process and our strategy. The other process that's going forward is with Congress, and that's another way to potentially stop this rule. And we've had language included in the Interior Appropriations Bill, which was sidelined just last week in the House, and then also standalone legislation by Senator Barrasso on the Senate side to put a stop to it. So we're working every potential angle we can to put a stop to the rule. Now, to your question on the next administration, we certainly look forward to hopefully a more friendly administration on this front so that we can see this rule removed by the next administration if we're not successful in the courts or with Congress.
A couple things on the Endangered Species Act and maybe some of these situations. There's been some movement. First, talk about the sage grouse.
Right. So the Endangered Species Act is another priority for our organizations across the country because of the impacts that are so negative to cattle producers. With the sage grouse in particular, that's facing over 100 million acres across 11 western states, and the Fish and Wildlife Service is scheduled to make a listing decision by September. Our problem is with the Bureau of Land Management and Forest Service implementing plans that are going to greatly restrict grazing and other activities across federal lands in the West. So we're working with Congress now through the National Defense Authorization Act to get language passed that Mr. Bishop from Utah introduced to block the listing of the sage grouse and also turn back those plans by the federal agencies to be consistent with state-developed, locally developed management plans for the sage grouse. So that's ongoing this week and next as we work through the conference process in Washington, D.C.
Let's talk about something important to Kansas farmers and ranchers. The lesser prairie chicken release just came out and said, imagine this, got a little rain, numbers are up, but still been a really bad situation. Some groups calling a campaign Stop Foul Play.
Right. The lesser prairie chicken is another great concern for us in the mid part of the country, and another example of the Endangered Species Act and how it's broken. I think the fact that a 25% increase over just the last year because of weather conditions and favorable conditions for the bird show that the Endangered Species Act is not what saves and recovers species. The federal government and bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. are not going to save the lesser prairie chicken, the sage grouse, the wolves. You go on and on with the list. But with respect to the lesser prairie chicken, the range-wide plan that the states have implemented show that the states can better manage for these species. And in that, with that example, we have gone to Congress and again asked for congressional action. And included in the National Defense Authorization Act, again, as with the sage grouse, similar to that, there's language by Mr. Lucas that would actually delist the lesser prairie chicken and the American burying beetle. That's another provision that we're supporting and that we're working on through conference this week and next as the Senate and House try to come to an agreement on differences between those funding bills.
And if that wasn't enough, also you had a release come out just a few days ago with what you're calling another land grab by the administration. A lot of public lands or lands out west becoming public.
That's correct. The president last Friday, just before the weekend, as we usually see these releases, announced designation of 3 new national monuments under the Antiquities Act. One in Nevada, which consists of 700,000 acres, another one in California, which consists of 330,000 acres, both opposed by our state cattle and sheep affiliates and at the national level. But again, he is abusing this Antiquities Act that was reserved for protecting these pieces of antiquity, or very small areas of antiquity. Unfortunately, this is being done in replace of the ability of environmentalists to move wilderness designations through Congress. So this will have negative impacts on livestock grazing in those areas, which is why we're opposed to them. The only solution is to work with Congress to amend and modernize the Antiquities Act to bring the public back into this process instead of just a stroke of a pen by the administration.
All right, Dustin. Well, there's obviously lots of issues that you continue to work on, so good to talk to you, and we'll catch up some more updates later.
Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Dustin Van Liew heads up the Public Lands Council, has joined us from Denver. I'm Ken Rogers.